The name Serafin sounds pretty French, but in fact it's a changed name. Serafin's father's name is Stanislaw, and he came from Poland. And I'm not sure what the original full name was, but I imagine there were a few more syllables in the name. He came in the late 30s. I'm not clear whether it was, and I don't think they all know whether it was 38 or 37. And at that time, he was a furniture maker, a woodworker. And at that time, though, any immigrants who came to France could not practice any trade that was considered competitive to French. So you could either be a miner, go down in the mines and mine coal, or you could be a farm worker, you know, work out in vegetable gardens or whatever. Well, he chose the vegetable gardens to the working, going down in the mine, and it was at that time, shortly after that, he met his wife, was married. World War II started. He joined the Polish resistance, but before he left, I guess, must have conceived Christian, then went off to fight with the Poles against the Germans in the battle on the coast of Norway. They were defeated. He escaped from Norway to England and was heading back to France. Came across the Channel, arrived in what's this town? Begins with C. Calais. Got to Paris, made it okay, because at this time the Germans were occupying France. Got to within 10 kilometers of Gevrey-Chambertin, and the Germans spotted him and arrested him and sent him to a Stalag for 5 years. At the end of the war, he returned home, and his son Christian was 5 years old, had never seen him, never met him. And he was looking obviously for work, and by coincidence, an Italian by the name of Weygandt had just purchased a domain in Gevrey, and needing someone to work the vineyards for him, was advertising. And because Serafin knew a little bit about horticulture, applied for the job, and since there was probably nobody else who did apply for the job, he got the job. And so, you know, took over, you know, started to handle the vineyard, the viticulture for this family, and learned a lot. He said, Christian said, his father learned a lot just from the other growers in Gevrey, teaching him and sharing what they knew. But it was a coincidence that Weygendt's daughter had married a notaire, and I don't know if you know what the position of a notaire is in France, but we don't have anything quite like it here in America. We have lawyers, and lawyers kind of do everything. But in France, the practicing of the legal profession is divided in two parts. There are what the French call avocats, which are what the English call barristers, you know, who do trial work, and then there are notaires who do more functional work, you know, handle real estate transactions, estate planning, and so forth. And in addition, the notaire has a very close contact with sort of the real estate business of Burgundy, or of France. And so this notaire kind of took Serafin under his wing and helped him put together his own domain. At that time, things weren't like they are now in Burgundy, where land is extraordinarily valuable. Then there was a depression essentially in France after the war, and there was very little value to the land. Land was being abandoned, estates, people would die, they didn't know what to do with the estates. So the notaire had a particular advantage, kind of knowing what was becoming available and kind of fed that information through to Stanislav Serafin. And it was, this is a long story getting to the point of the tasting. That's how he acquired these parcels. And so, for instance, the Burgundy, let's just start with the Burgundy, they're very good parcels of Burgundy. They're close to Appellation Gevrey Chambertin. On the map here, you can see there's part of Gevrey Chambertin below the Route Nationale, but then there are parts of it that are above the Route Nationale and are right next to Village, or Côte de Nuit Village. And he has a lot, several parcels that are in this area here that adjoins Gevrey Village. And his Gevrey Village are some are below, some are above, but again, most are above the Route Nationale, and they're very, very well situated. The Gevrey Chambertin Premier, or Vieille Vigne, are all parcels of Gevrey that adjoin parcels of Premier Cru. So it's a kind of an in-between almost of Gevrey. The parcels are very well situated, and the vines are very old because they date back to that time when his father was putting together the domain in the late 40s. So these are, essentially 60-year-old plus vines, Gevrey. The Corbeau, I don't know if you're familiar with Corbeau, Premier Cru Corbeau, but you've heard of Mazy Chambertin. Corbeau is the Premier Cru that adjoins Mazy Chambertin. So on one side of Mazy Chambertin is Claude Bez, Chambertin Claude Bez, and to the north of Mazy is Corbeau, Premier Cru Corbeau. And his vines of Corbeau are very close to Mazy. The next is the Casetier, and Howard, I think, arranged this tasting very, very well, because you kind of go through the first 5 wines and there's a progression up in terms of weight and structure and style till you get to the Casetier, which many people believe is as good or maybe even better than the Charme, particularly when they're young. The Casetier is really extraordinary. Often gets higher scores in the Wine Advocate than the Charme, or sometimes does, I should say. And this is a great parcel. It adjoins Clos Saint-Jacques, and as you know, if you're familiar with Armand Rousseau, in his hierarchy of his vineyards, he places the Clos Saint-Jacques right after Chambertin Claude Bez, ahead of all the other Grand Crus. He places it ahead of his Mazy, ahead of his Charme, ahead of his Clos La Roche. So Clos Saint-Jacques is a great parcel, and Casetier adjoins Clos Saint-Jacques. So it's almost one of those near Grand Cru, if you will. And then the tasting kind of starts over with the Fontenay. Fontenay is the Premier Cru that adjoins Ruchot Chambertin. And Ruchot is a higher elevation than the other Chambertin, I call them satellites. So you have Chambertin Claude Bez, Mazy, they adjoin each other, and then up the hill above those is Ruchot. So Ruchot is a bit more elegant, a little bit more mineral, less weighty than say Mazy normally. And the Fontenay, being just adjoining that, kind of shares that characteristic. So I find the Fontenay always to be a wine of really great elegance and precision and length. Then we move from there to the Morey Saint-Denis. Milan, and in particular Serafin's parcel of Milan, is right across the road which is called the Route des Grands Crus. It's a little, it's a road about the size of these two tables put together. So it's not even a road. But it's right across this road from Grand Cru Clos La Roche in Moray Saint-Denis. And his parcel of Milan is right at the top of that Premier Cru. And then number 8 is Chambord-les-Baudes. And you know where Bonmar is in Chambord-Musigny. Well, Les Baudes is a Premier Cru that is right across the Route des Grands Crus from Bonmar, in the Chambord section of Bonmar. And the Serafin parcel of Les Baudes is right at the top of that Premier Cru, right at the top of Les Baudes. So it's literally across the Route des Grands Crus from Bonmar. And lastly, this is Chambertin, which is always kind of the most grand, if you will, and a little bit more backward than the others that are showing, I think, today. And he has actually parcels in 2 places. One in the real, if you will, Chambertin, and the other in Mazoyer, Chambertin. And as you might know, Mazoyer is the part of the Chambertin group that is nearest to Moray Saint-Denis. You have La Trissière on one side of the Route des Grands Crus, you have Mazoyer on the other side, adjoining Moray. And under French law, Mazoyer can be marketed, can be labeled as Charme, because I guess it's believed that Mazoyer is so long, and also because it might be slightly confusing with Mazie. So it's perfectly permissible if you have a parcel of Mazoyer to label it as Chambertin. Or in this case, he has both Charme and Mazoyer, so he can put them together as Chambertin. And that's always a wine that just ages beautifully. I've had the pleasure of having his 1985 from this vineyard, and it's still really, really marvelous.